Hello, everyone. I'm Angela with Real Raw Relationships, and I want to welcome you to a very special episode. Basically, if you've ever felt like you've had ADHD, autism, anxiety, bipolar disorder, or whatever label that people have given you, if you've ever felt like that's running the show, then this episode is here to remind you who's really in charge. Here's the hint. It's you. Anthony and I dive into why your diagnosis doesn't have to define who you are. We swap stories about the awkward, messy, and downright funny parts of neurodivergent life, like the time I found my keys in the fridge and the moments that made us cry and heal. So this episode is going to get real. We talk about feeling broken, feeling different, and finally learning that we're not alone and certainly not broken at all. And through all that heaviness, we will be laughing a little, hopefully, because it's my program. So whether you're driving to yet another therapy appointment or just chilling at home, I hope you'll feel like you're right here with us, hanging out with the cool clan, friends who truly get you. So let's jump in and start this conversation. Let's go.
Welcome to the carnival. I'm the ringleader now. Won't hear a sound at all. It's out very loose, 6 feet underground.
Hello, Anthony. How are you?
Hey, Angela, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So I can't wait to get into this. And I really just want you to give the listeners a real take on who you are. So can you tell us a little bit about you, your background?
That's going to take a long time. Just kidding. The
Bullet
highlights.
points.
Bullet point highlights. I'm 32, and in the last 10 years, I've trained as an engineer. I've practiced as an engineer, and then I had a bipolar crisis. I've taken a bunch of psychedelics, which may or may not be related, most likely not related to the bipolar crises. I am a big festival hippie. I'm a fan of music festivals. They really changed my life, and I found communities there. And because of the bipolar, I went much deeper into self-help and personal transformation in search for the truth. When I was first diagnosed, I was taking medications that put me in a depression for the first time in my life. And I thought, there's no way that I'm going to live my whole life in this kind of hellhole experience. And since then, I have done a bunch of inner work. I've quit medications. I've pivoted into coaching, and now I'm trying to make an impact in the world of mental health, and particularly the neurodivergent world.
I love that. I love that. So during this journey, rather, right? I really want to know, when you first got diagnosed, what did it feel like? Did it feel like a relief or like somebody was labeling you?
It was absolutely shit. I mean, I didn't believe in a bipolar diagnosis. And although my diagnosis was 7.5 years ago, and I've had one more big episode that landed me in the hospital since then, which was 5.5 years ago. Part of me doesn't believe that I'm bipolar. Part of me believes I was misdiagnosed, and actually the real root cause of it was ADHD and trauma. But part of me believes, okay, it is possible that I'm bipolar, but it was only really activated because of life circumstances. And in that case, it really was not helpful, because it kind of gives you this idea. At first, it gave me this idea that I was broken, that I was told I had a chemical imbalance in my brain, and that the solution was these medications from the hospital. And actually, in my felt experience, the medication was putting me in the lowest energy levels I've ever had in my adult life until that point. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Now I really have to know, okay? I mean, you don't have to tell me, but I prefer you to tell me. What were these medications?
When I was first diagnosed, I was on risperidone, and eventually I stopped, and then I took other medications. When I had a second hospitalization, I moved on to olanzapine and then on to quetiapine. And then quetiapine is the one that I slowly, gradually reduced until the point of quitting them completely. So I've experienced three different kinds of antipsychotic type medications.
So my son, I think we talked about this when we talked earlier, but when he was 5 years old, he was on risperidone. And it was like actually one of the things that helped me win my case to get full custody of my kids, because my ex-husband was like, I don't believe the kids need any meds. They're completely fine. But he was like incredibly abusive. And so the judge was like, well, he's 5 and he's taking a pretty hardcore antipsychotic. So maybe you need to like reassess, right? And it turns out, just like you said, it was something where it really just numbs some of those feelings, those emotions. It makes you feel like he was getting more in control, but we had to adjust the meds so many times. Next thing you know, he's 9 years old and he was taking 5 meds and they wanted to give him a 6th. And I was like, so here's the deal. We're detoxing. Right? Because I was at a level where I started noticing and I started learning just like you. And I was like, man, like this is really, really not helping. It's basically like a different form of a coping mechanism, right? Where you're just using it. And so when he would forget to take his meds, Anthony, he would sit there and he would be like, I'm acting this way because I forgot to take my meds. I was like, no, you're not. You're acting this way because you're being a little shit. You're a kid. That's what you do, right? And so when he started seeing that he wasn't the problem and it was the fact that he was using all these meds to kind of basically mask the shit he was going through. Can you explain that for your own journey? Kind of, I know you touched on it, but I want to know, like, what are some of these feelings and emotions that you were feeling when you started realizing, okay, I'm actually hiding some parts of me and some things that need to be worked on, and that's really what's going on here?
So one of the big pieces of the puzzle for me was trauma. I was completely unaware of trauma. And now it's not that my parents divorced. It's not that they were abusive. It's not that they were addicted. None of that. I had a pretty quote unquote happy childhood. I was always fed, always loved. I was never hit, blah, blah, blah. It's the kind of subtle things that create psychological wounds. And there was something that happened not directly to me, but to one of my parents. And the impact that had on me as a 4-year-old about to turn 5 is something that was a factor. And I was completely unaware of all the emotional development stuff related to trauma. On top of that, there was a lot of making sense of the world that I hadn't yet done. I had experienced a bunch of psychedelics before my bipolar diagnosis. So I've seen things swirl. I've been in altered states of consciousness. And there was an important note. I hadn't taken any substances within the 3 or 4 weeks before my bipolar diagnosis. Actually, the diagnosis was sparked from extraneous events that led me into a state of panic. I thought I saw a hallucination, which was my psychosis, but then I was able to look into it in a calm way and realize, okay, it wasn't what I thought I saw, but it put me in a panicked state. And on top of that, there were a whole bunch of other things that were happening in my life. I was just in my first job at that point. I had worked there for 2 years, and I was about to quit that job. So it was the last day of my job. I was going to move countries from the US to Europe, and it was all this chaos of life. Basically, I was gonna leave my friendship circle. I was gonna leave the life that I had built for the last 5-6 years. I had no plan for where I was going. I did not have a job yet. I just knew that I was gonna move. And on top of that, I did not have the spiritual grounding to make sense of who I am in the world, and understand kind of the big questions in life. Who am I? What is death? Why does the world exist? Why do I exist? Why are we having this experience instead of none at all? And all of this stuff is stuff that was popping up in my bipolar episode kind of thoughts. And I was trying, like, the energy that I had in the episodes, I was trying to share with people that I had some insights. And I was also seeking to understand what was going on in a better way.
So I'm really, really curious because I know you mentioned that a lot, that nothing really substantial happened. But I remember we talked in our pre-interview chat, and you had mentioned the your weight and how kids were kind of making fun of you. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally know how damaging that can be for your sense of self, right? Because you get told that you're fat. So for me, it was my acne, right? I had really bad acne, and kids can be cruel. And I remember this boy telling me that he couldn't possibly even think about kissing me because my face looked like a pig's butt, which, mind you, I don't know how many pig's butts he looked at. That was really awkward for me. I was like, I think we're missing the bigger question here. Why are you looking at a pig's butt? But to kind of get back on the path, it really just started, it eats at your sense of self, essentially, right? So the psychedelics and everything, obviously anything that is not natural is going to fuck with your brain, right? So these psychedelics, could it possibly be that these psychedelics were actually causing you to get this bipolar diagnosis?
So there's two threads there to speak about. One was the weight thing, which I absolutely resonate with, and I'll circle back to the psychedelics eventually, because I
want to know the connection
in psychedelics, and I do a lot of psychedelic research myself.
Gotcha.
As in reading the literature, reading the research. So on the weight thing, yeah, I used to be obese, actually. When I tell people this today, they don't believe me. And I go, yeah, I was on the, on the BMI, I was technically on the borderline of obese. On the lower end, like the first qualifying of obese, but still obese, which means not just overweight, but beyond that. And this was more or less from 10 to 16 or so. And then I was working on my weight from 16 to 24. I ended up losing 20 pounds in a certain few chunks of time. So it came in waves as I got more learning, and as I got more practicing different things, mindset shifts, nutrition shifts, lifestyle shifts, all of this. But my point is, in between those ages of actually getting obese around 10 to 12, that was already a symptom of something psychological that was going on. Like, if you're in a happy, healthy situation and you're not self-medicating something, whether it's with drugs, alcohol, or food, or a behavior like gambling or whatever it may be, sex, masturbation, porn, some kind of self-medication, it's already means that there's a symptom. And for me, I think that it is related to the traumas from 0 to 7 that I experienced.
Yeah.
So then, as a coping mechanism, food is an easy way to change your states. It's an easy way to change your neurochemistry, to get some dopamine, to tune out whatever painful thing is happening in the environment, and to kind of numb yourself. And it took me years between I actually lost the obesity and then I took on different coping mechanisms like drinking and partying and smoking. And I undid all of those coping mechanisms. I stopped drinking. I stopped partying for escapist reasons. I stopped smoking. And then what resurfaced in my adult life at a healthy weight? Binge eating disorder, because I still hadn't dealt with the psychological issues. And I was at a healthy weight. But I was still not satisfied with my body. And I hadn't forgiven myself for my psychological wounds because I was not aware they even existed. And that was a big part of the problem. And it's impossible for me to know how much of a contributing factor all of that was to bipolar, in addition to the life circumstances.
Love that. Okay. So in relation then, let's go back to the psychedelics. So I really want to see how that led to your would you call it addiction to the psychedelics, or your experience with the psychedelics rather?
Yeah, I would say experience, because I've rekindled my relationship with psychedelics in the sense that I want to give the picture of the story as I see it. I probably did 30 plus psychedelic journeys before being diagnosed with bipolar. And actually, there was no direct link in my experience between psychedelics and the symptoms of bipolar. What I did notice led to a shift in bipolar type of symptoms was going to my first camping music festival. So prior to that, I had experienced 2 other festivals, the same one in 2 different years, and it was a festival in the city. And I'm going to tie all these pieces together.
Okay.
The use of drugs, including psychedelics, I'd been doing for a long time and no bipolar symptoms. But when I went to the camping music festival, which happened in a forest and it happened in Michigan, it led me to complete mental shifts, complete mental perceptions of the world that were totally different than before. And coming out of that festival, I started having manic symptoms. I was just so excited. I was just so relieved. There was something that felt so good to be in, and felt so good that it existed, for many reasons that I'm still trying to unpack as I keep going to more festivals now. One of those reasons was a sense of community. Another one of those reasons was being fully in nature. And I think there's an element of flow and art and just expanded creativity, expanded pattern recognition, and a fullness of love in that festival environment, which I had never experienced before. And this little bubble of what I perceived to be some kind of paradise, in contrast to the world that I was living in before, which was working an engineering job, 9 to 5, living for the weekend, drinking and trying to pick up girls on the weekends. That was what I knew my life to be. When I went to that festival, I experienced a totally different paradigm. One with community, full of love, in nature, where needs are met, where arts is celebrated, where nobody is thought of as weird or different. Everybody is just celebrated for them being who they are. And there's all this music and food and entertainment and great stuff. And for me, just to know that this world, this little bubble of paradise was possible, was a complete paradigm shift. And that is actually what started my manic symptoms. I got so excited. My whole friendship circles saw there was a big change within me. Since then, I've integrated that, and I'm no longer hit by the fact that I had never experienced this again. Now I know that it exists and I've processed it. But the first time I experienced it, it was a big, big mental shift.
Can you describe that to me? I want to get like a visual of this mental shift, right? Because I want to know what we're all about, real and raw here. So I want to know, what was the hardest thing to deal with mentally in that shift?
I didn't think anything was hard. I was elated. I was high. I was high on life, not drugs, because the drugs had faded away. I did take drugs that weekend, but I was manic for a few weeks. And it's because I realized that there was the potential for a world so much more simple and so much more fulfilling and free and full of love and just fun that I didn't know was possible to access. I remember distinctly speaking with one of the people who worked as a part of the staff. They were dressed up in some kind of costume, and I was like, oh, okay. So we started chatting about work. I shared that I was an engineer. They shared that they worked there. And I was like, oh, cool. So what else do you do, like, other than this? And they told me something along the lines of, they go from festival to festival doing this kind of artsy job, either performance or volunteering or whatever it was. I don't even remember what they said, but I retained that they went from festival to festival and just enjoyed their life so much. And for me, I hadn't really met people who were so into the life that they were leading. And as an engineer, I had my great days. I loved my job certain times, but other times it was like, oh, I got to drag myself through the snow. I got to get in the car. I got to go to work. I got to do these annoying things. I got to be there at a certain time.
Essentially, you kind of sat there and you were like, is this going to be the rest of my life? Right?
Yeah, kind of like realizing that what I knew as normal and good, I didn't have a comparison of what would be extraordinary. And when I saw the lifestyle that this guy was living, I thought, wow, this is an extraordinary life experience. I want more of that. And that actually made me start to want to make shifts in my life. That's when I decided I want to be an entrepreneur so that I have more time, freedom in order to go to more festivals. It also made me kind of give an ultimatum to my boss at work that I was going to quit at some point. So I wanted to work less hours, and I was able to. And I was able to get the same amount done on a part-time basis than I was doing on a full-time basis, because I was maybe 70 or 80% fulfilled. I was not 100% fulfilled. So instead, I just collapsed what I needed to get done in the time that I could do it. And I freed up more time so that I explored my artsy side. I started writing poetry. I started doing other things like reading a bit more on different subjects that I was curious about. And those were some of the symptoms of mania. But a lot of it was genuine as well, genuine interest, genuine desire, genuine motivation. So it's really hard to separate the two.
So, can you really describe to me what exactly is mania? If you were to be, a dictionary, what would you describe mania as?
Yeah, so there's a
I have
spectrum.
a point here that I'm going to get to, but
Yeah, that sounds good. So mania is basically a certain level of abnormal amounts of high energy, fast speech, incoherence, lack of sleep as well. Basically, your brain is firing on all cylinders, and you're kind of jittery and going nonstop on the things that excite you or the things that you are, that are interesting to you at that moment. But there's a degree of unhealthiness to it, in the sense that you're not sleeping much. Like people on mania can go for days without sleep, or for days with very minimal amount of sleep, like a few hours a night, and they're still high energy, hyperactive, very fast paced, and a little incomprehensible in the string of thoughts that they're sharing as well. So I'm very mindful of that myself now.
so it's funny because we have all these diagnoses out here, right? And we're like, like almost everybody has ADHD. Oh, I'm autistic. Oh, I have ADHD. Oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I have literally and there's a lot of people that are not even diagnosed. And there's a lot of people that are diagnosed, but they're not getting to the heart of it, right? Because you don't really actually get to the heart. You can't get to know somebody in one sitting. I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of psychiatric abilities you think you have. You can't truly and fully know somebody, in my opinion, to be able to diagnose them and say, this is just who you are, right? So for me, when I see mania, I'm like, well, I had mania, I had depressive moods, right? I had narcissistic traits, because we learn all these traits. We learn these traits, like in your field, right? It's very fast paced, right? Where you had to do a lot of things. You had a lot of tasks to get done, a lot of meetings, a lot of appointments, everything, right? And so could it possibly be, I know, like with me, with my keys in the fridge, I would lose my keys everywhere, in the fridge, on the ground. My kids would always be like, you're always losing your keys. But it's that constant go in your head, and you're not able to stop. So could it be that those psychedelics actually just helped you do that? Just stop and realize, like, the saying, stop and smell the roses. So could it be that those psychedelics just let you stop and just enjoy? And so you just not that taking out the diagnosis and the oh, I have mania. Just, could it possibly be that your body was just like, fuck this, I want to have some fun, and you got excited and exhilarated by it, and you're like, I want to do this, I want to read this book, I want to do puzzles, I want to experience life outside of a job.
Absolutely, yes. So for me, I'd rather do a microdose of a psychedelic than to drink 3 drinks at a bar, which is what I would have done if I wasn't on psychedelics. So it was kind of a conscious way to do it, actually. But I know that there were 2 big needs drivers that were underneath it now. One of them was the need for transcendence, kind of to go beyond this everyday experience, and kind of to go beyond our default mode network of just operating and seeing the world, kind of get a break from the mundane. You know what I mean? And
that's where the neurodivergence comes in, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a way to self-medicate ADHD, and also at the same time to get into some spiritual experiences and to make a greater sense of the world. And to be honest, in those days there was a lot of escapism to it as well. Like, I just did it for the fun. because it was I'd rather have a day on a psychedelic as a fun experience than not. Without necessarily seeking anything out of it, except the same reasons that anyone has a drink to enjoy being in an altered state of slight tipsiness or drunkenness. But for me, it was drunk on psychedelics. But the other reason I think that I was seeking it is because it tends to lead us into a flow state. And whether we're in an experience or whether it just happens kind of naturally on psychedelics, there's a lot of flow that happens. And this is something that I realized later in my life and in my coaching career when I specialized in flow state neuroscience. I realized, wow, the connecting points of all my addictions, quote unquote, was having to do a lot with flow states. Because prior to that, when I was a teenager, I was sucked into video games and online poker. When I was partying, when I was smoking, when I was on psychedelics, all these experiences, and even the professional opportunities when I had the most fun, is because when I experienced a lot of flow in those times.
So
what I'm saying is it was a quick and easy access to flow states for me to self-medicate with psychedelics, and
Quick
it was
fix.
a fun exploration, let's say.
It's kind of like the quick fix.
Yeah, exactly. But to circle back to the, how much did it help contribute or cause bipolar? I don't know. My belief at the moment is quite minimal. It did change my brain in certain ways, but I think more in positive ways than negative ones.
So there's always positives and negatives to every single thing, right? In our life. No matter what it is, you can have a piece of cheesecake and say it's wonderful, and it's still gonna put some junk in the trunk, and love those love handles. You know what I'm talking about. So we go from the video games to the binge eating to the bipolar to the psychedelics. So taking all of these things out as we wrap up, I want to know, what does it look like for you to sit with yourself outside of all these things? What does it look like to sit with who you are right now and the acceptance you have of yourself?
I've gotten to the point where I no longer identify with my body. I believe that we're all one consciousness. We're just manifesting in different forms, each with our own path. And I think we're guided much more by things that are outside of our conscious control. To some extent, there's conscious control, of course, but what makes me born where I was born? What makes you born where you were born? And why does the universe exist? These are all big questions. For me, like who I am, I can use labels and I can say I'm this, I'm that, blah, blah, blah. But I think of it in the same way as I think of my bipolar and I think of obesity. I've experienced bipolar, but it does not define me. I've experienced obesity, but it does not define me. What defines me is the present moment. Like the version of me right now is a different version of me than right now. I mean, the difference that it took to go from that now to this now is already a different version of me. Every breath of air that we take in, we have new molecules come into us and we expire new molecules. Every time we eat food, we're changing what makes the cells of our body. Every time we have new thoughts, we're changing what makes up our thoughts and emotion systems. And we are all these things, which is connected to everything that exists, most close to your environment, but like this whole idea of identity was one of the big pieces that I really wanted to resolve. I think that I was seeking answers to because of the bipolar thing, because of also researching and self-diagnosing with ADHD and trying to understand more of why my behaviors are such that they are as I observe them. But those are all manifestations that arise and fall within awareness. And I have had experiences both in substance-induced states and as well as naturally induced states, like with exercise, breath work, and cold water, that have made my awareness completely detached from my body. And this gives me the strong belief that I'm not my body, I'm not my thoughts. Just like those spiritual teachers say, you are the awareness who is witnessing all those things. This is my belief about who I am. So no label can define me and no behavior can define me. It's all just information that is happening in my awareness, and it's information that can be useful to me so that I reach a next level and a higher level, if that makes any sense. I hope it answers your question in some way.
It does. It does. And I would say that I definitely have noticed throughout my journey how insignificant things can become when you look at the bigger picture. We have all these experiences and we have them define us, and we say that this is who I am, and we limit our own beliefs and our own potential and our own mindset, really, because we let somebody else tell us who we are or what we are going to become. Yeah. Yeah. We allow others to program our brains. So,
and we have no choice about it.
Yeah.
Like when we're a kid from age 0 to 5, you have no choice but to be programmed by your environment and adapt to it.
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22. I think the
really
beauty of being an adult is that we can realize how much programming there is, and our body and brain and nervous system have the ability to rewrite these programs if you want to choose to go down that path. Educate yourself and start practicing, but over time you can rewrite the programs, and that's what leads to the beautiful stories of transformation that people have, and shifts in mindset of feeling limited to feeling empowered.
I think we definitely can all benefit from not allowing others, anyone, no matter who it is, defining who we are, defining by what we've done. Oh, well, I just think that you're not a very artistic person. I think that I'm not a good cook. I am not this, I'm not that. And how the fuck do you even know? It's all learned behaviors. So you can't sit there and say, that's like sitting there and calling somebody narcissistic when they really just don't know who they are and they can't sit with who they are, right? So what is one final thing for you to say to our listeners?
You spoke to a lot of surface level symptoms, things like depression, anxiety, bipolar, ADHD, autism, all of these things that have their value. They do. I don't want people to feel like disempowered because of these things being a label that is associated with other stuff. But at the same time, I want people to be empowered for themselves, to be able to come up with their own truth, figure out what was it that led to this. There are very surface level explanations when we take the programming from society. Like, oh, my parents were bipolar, so I'm bipolar, and the end. Actually, it's a lot more complex than that when you go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. The medical system has its wonderful capacities, but it does not know everything. Why would the mental health and physical health crises be exponential now compared to 50 years ago?
Right.
There are societal elements to it. There is the stress, there's the environment, there's the overwhelm, there's the purpose, there's spirituality to it, there's relationships and community and belonging. And when we think about these symptoms like depression, anxiety, ADHD, all these things, what we're seeing is the very tip of the iceberg. Behind that, there's emotions and all sorts of things going on in the body and the environment. And behind that, there's neurochemistry and all sorts of hormone activities and all of that. But you can change from the very bottom of the iceberg. You can change that stuff when you put enough deliberate practice into it. So I guess the real take-home message is, don't just take the programming to be something that you believe in because you have never checked it. Do the checking for yourself. Try to find your truth, because it's not a psychiatrist or a psychologist who's met you for less than 10 hours who's going to overrule with more data about your life than you do in 30, 40, or 50 years. Like, you're the one who's lived your life. Only you have the full picture. So don't be disempowered by what someone says in 1 or 5 or 10 hours, just based on looking at a snapshot of your life. It's like judging me as a person today based on a picture from 10 years ago or 5 years ago. That makes no sense. So
you look at it and you're like, wow, that used to be me. That used to be me. That also used to be me. And that also used to be me. But they are still all you, but they're just steps in your life, essentially, right?
Exactly. And that's how you rewrite your programming. You look at your past, you make sense of it, and you go from one story to another story, and you go from limited to empowered, and just keep searching and keep improving yourself until you get closer and closer to the truth. Because the closer you are to your own truth, the more your life will improve, because you'll understand yourself better and you'll feel better, and everything is going to be impacted positively by that.
100%. And you never do fully get there. I believe 110% that you never stop. You never stop. You never reach that like full, I reach my full potential. You never. That's why you have people that are 70 years old that, are saying stuff that are so profound, and you're like, wow. And they can just see things in different light, And then you have other people that are 70 years old and they're still stuck in their mindset of when they were 40, and they're telling you stories of when they were 40, But I believe that is a continual, and the more stuff the more you realize that you don't know. The more you realize that this can be true, but this also can be true. I can have anxiety, and I can sit there and say I have ADHD. I can sit there and say, I could sit there and say I have bipolar. I could sit there and say I'm a narcissist. All of them can be true, and all of them can be false. It is basically opening up your mind to the possibilities of who you could be and who you actually are.
And the importance is the meaning that you make of it. You can say I have ADHD, so that means I'm limited and I'm forgetful and I struggle with focus. Or you can say I have ADHD, I'm super creative, I can thrive and balance multiple projects in a risky, time-pressured situation, and better than neurotypical people. And that's great.
And you can practice working on those other qualities that you say are like your negative qualities. They don't have to be negative qualities. Like you said, you can say that, but even like, I have problems focusing. Well, then fucking work on it, right? If you start a job and you sit there and say, I know everything there is to know about this job, you sound like an idiot. But if you go in there and you have the mindset, okay, I don't know everything about this job, so how am I going to fix it? How am I going to work on it? It's the same thing with your mind. It's the same thing with any of these diagnoses. You have the power no matter what anyone else says. It's like somebody that, gets paralyzed and they sit there and they say, oh, well, I can't walk. But where's the potential of you being able to walk? Where is that mindset that pushes past into those neural pathways and starts rebuilding so that you do have the potential to have some sort of form? I know somebody that was paralyzed and they slowly but surely have been able to do more mobility. And I mean, they're not running sprints, but who's to say they can't in 10 years? We can't assume that our negative qualities are negative qualities. They're just qualities. They're just things that we can work on and shift.
Exactly. Or fixed. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing needs to be
Nothing's
fixed.
Exactly. Yes. And with that, I will let you go. It has been such an honor. I will definitely have to get you on here again.
Thank
All
you
right.
for having me.
Thank you.